Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments, such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org.
Local news, fire alerts, music that brings us together. Boise State Public Radio is not optional, it's essential. But after the Senate cut off federal support, we are facing a serious funding shortfall. Your gift today helps keep this free local service on the air for everyone in every corner of Idaho. You can go to boisestatepublicradio.org and donate now.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Samantha Wright, filling in for Jim Gaudette. It's Idaho Matters. Holdbacks. It's not a word we've heard for a while in Idaho. These are mid-year cuts in spending when revenues fall below expectations, and Idaho needs to start trimming expenses to keep the budget in the black. We haven't had them for a while in the Gem State, but they're nothing new. We had holdbacks in 1986, 1992, 1996 and 7, 2002 and 3, 2008 through 2010, and 2020. But not everyone's heard of them, and since Idaho ended the fiscal year this month with a surplus, why is Governor Brad Little thinking about cutting budgets before January's 2026 Idaho legislative session? Here to answer that question is our own legislative reporter and expert, James Dawson. Jimmy, thanks for being here.
Hey, glad to be here, Sam.
Okay, so Idaho brought in $5.5 billion with a B dollars over the last fiscal year, wrapped up the fiscal year with $345 million in the bank. So what's the problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated question that everyone is kind of asking themselves in the state budgeting world right now. The big thing that a lot of people point to, and certainly what, the Division of Financial Management Director Lori Wolf pointed to in a memo from May was, the $450 million in various tax cuts or tax credits that were approved by the legislature and signed by Governor Brad Little earlier this year. I mean, it's kind of hard to suddenly fill in $450 million. They expect that or those tax cuts to eventually pay off in the long run with, increased corporate and personal income tax collections coming down the pike, even though, they cut those rates. But they believe that'll stimulate economic activity and eventually get them more money in the long run.
Well, and there were some other issues, and we'll come back to the cuts, but sales taxes are down. Is that true?
They are, yeah. So if you look over the past couple of years, it's actually been declining from, let's see, if we're talking June, the end of fiscal year 2023, which would have been in 2023, sales tax collections were about $2.3 billion rather. Then they go down the following year to $1.8 billion, and then ending this year, $1.7 billion. That's still trying to figure out exactly what that is, but, it could potentially be, if you think back to what was going on, in 2022, 2023, still COVID times. Maybe people were still spending their extra COVID relief money, things like that. And that was something that state economists and budget experts have been talking about for several years now. Like, hey, we got all drugged up on this COVID money, and now it's time for the come down.
Okay, I love that. Also, I saw higher health insurance costs for state workers. Normally you would think like, okay, that's not a big deal, but pretty big jump.
So I've been trying to figure this one out too. The latest I saw from Idaho Capital Sun's Kyle Fonensteel back in June, showing that premiums are going to rise for sure. They generally do every year, but most people are going to see an 8.8% increase in their premiums to come up for this 18% increase. so people were saying that, this is really just due to a lot of usage, right? More medical claims, people going to the doctor or going to the emergency room, getting surgery, things like that. But also the higher use of these GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic for weight loss, right? Those are a big moneymaker for the pharmaceutical companies, and people have just been jumping on them over the past couple of years.
Well, and when we've talked about those drugs on the Dr. Roundtable, those aren't cheap. Those are expensive. So
Absolutely.
I could
Yeah,
see
I mean,
that.
yeah. So they're, the pharmaceutical companies that develop them are sure cashing in right now on those while they still have exclusive, copyright's not the right word, but to the formulations, exclusive access before they go generic in, still several years away. But
Yeah.
they're going to be spendy for the foreseeable future.
You talked about last year's tax cuts. That's part of this whole idea package here that we're talking about. And I think Governor Little, before he signed those tax cuts, was concerned, right? Wasn't he concerned about that?
He was. We had, every spring the Idaho Press Club has a on the record hour-long conversation with the governor, and people asked him about, the tax package that was making its way through the legislature at the time hadn't been approved yet by both houses. Or both chambers rather, and he straight up said, if I thought we could afford $450 million, I would have proposed $450 million in tax cuts. He proposed half of that. So it's something that political folks will kind of point to, like, oh well, he's got to think about the political capital that he's going to spend. Like, is it worth vetoing this tax package if he doesn't get something else that he wanted? Don't really know what kind of horses were potentially up for trading in those conversations, because obviously, I'm not in the governor's office between him, the speaker, and the pro tem. I wish I was, but those are things that he had to weigh, and he, like you said, eventually signed it. So now we're just having to live with the consequences, and that potentially means those holdbacks.
So let's talk about the holdbacks themselves. The governor is asking state agencies to come up with plans for holdbacks of 2%, 4%, or 6%. What does that look like? What does that mean?
We don't know, because it's up to each individual state agency to come up with it. They weren't given any sort of directive as to, hey, you should concentrate on X funds, right? So each individual agency, they could potentially just go through their contracts. They could go through maybe some like federal grants or something, or state grants that they administer. They could hold those back. Of course, salaries and personnel are always one of the biggest costs for any state agency, so those could be on the table. Although I get the indication that for an agency like the Idaho State Police or any sort of public safety, those kinds of personnel would not be on the table, is my understanding. But everything is kind of up in the air right now, and the governor so far has not actually chosen to hold back any of these monies. So this is all just theoretical at this point, but it's something that is in the works behind the scenes.
Right. So you've got, there's a lot of state departments. There's agriculture, health and welfare, correction, and all of these now have to sit down and look at their budget and go, okay, if I had to cut 2, what would I cut? If I had to cut 4, what would I cut? And I had to cut 6, what do I cut? And then you take that and then you ship it off to the governor's office. Is that all the departments? Is anybody exempted? What about education?
K through 12 public education is exempt. He will not. He has said he will not cut those budgets, and that's really kind of playing on his reputation as the education governor, which is like one of his top priorities. So that wasn't necessarily a huge surprise, but because they've also been exempt from other larger holdbacks in the past, like during COVID, they didn't have to come up with as much as other state agencies did.
So the Division of Financial Management sent out this memo to the departments, and you have it in your story, which we'll link back to. We're telling everybody to, come up with budgets that would cut 246 and also prepare a maintenance budget for next year. What is a maintenance budget? What does that mean?
Depends on who you talk to, but essentially for this particular exercise, it means that you take what you're currently spending. You add in any sort of inflationary things, like, if you signed a multi-year contract, let's say, and there are different sorts of pay rates that you're having to pay for that, stepping up each year, you factor those in. And then also you factor in a 1% potential state employee pay raise in there as well. So really, it's just no new initiatives. Whatever you're spending right now is what you got, and please submit it to us. If you do happen to want something new, then it better be good, and you better get our permission first.
You better make a good case for it. When is this? When are these potential holdback budgets due? When do they have to get them all readied up?
Yeah, the state agencies have to send out these proposed budgets, and these are the maintenance budgets, we should say, by September, and that's every single year. So then the governor's office and the Division of Financial Management will look those over, and they'll use those to put out and produce their proposed budget for the legislature in January.
We're speaking with our political reporter, James Dawson, about possible financial holdbacks to state agencies in Idaho. I mentioned in the intro we've had holdbacks before. We've had a lot of them. I've reported on a lot of them over the years. This is not new. I mean, this happens, especially when there's a downturn in the economy or after 9/11, things like that.
Yeah. I mean, just think back to 2020, as you mentioned, where, budget cuts were at 5%, just immediately. So that's something that probably should stick in most people's minds. And it's, it wasn't just state government at that time, since it was COVID. It was, a lot of businesses either cut back significantly or some ended up folding, to that point. So it's nothing new. Generally happens during times of economic downturn or uncertainty. The fact that this has gotten public, and that memo, we should say again, was from May. The state officials that I've spoken to seem much more optimistic now than when that memo was written, that holdbacks may not be necessary. But they're just contingency planning, right? So it's still up in the air as to whether or not they'll ever be implemented. But the worries over how tariffs will affect state revenue or some other things having to do with federal funding, like, will there be massive budget cuts that will affect certain sectors of Idaho, things like that. We're getting a little bit more of a clear picture of that, and that has lessened the worry with state economists so far.
And I have to ask, we have money in our rainy day funds that the state has tucked away for a rainy day. Why don't we use that cushion if there is an issue?
We do. Well, that's a philosophical approach. We haven't gotten to speak directly with the governor about his thoughts of that, for this. But generally, rainy day funds are meant for extreme cases. I mean, we're talking about COVID. We're talking about, the last time that they were significantly used with the Great Recession in, 2011, 2012, 2013, things like that, to try to lessen the blow of those economic conditions. So really, people generally don't want to use these savings unless it's something more catastrophic than potentially a 2% holdback.
Right. How rainy does it have to rain? Running out of time. I will point out that holdbacks are permanent. Agencies, it doesn't spring back the next year and you suddenly get all that money that you got held back before. You have to kind of start from zero. What's next? Can the governor put a holdback in place anytime? Today? Tomorrow? What's next on the potential holdback calendar?
Yeah, anytime, anywhere, basically. So just keep an eye out if you're a state employee or have friends or family at the state. Just keep your ear to the ground.
Or if you need services from health and welfare or from
Correct.
any of those other departments. It affects everybody. Okay, we've been speaking with our political reporter, James Dawson, about possible budget holdbacks to state agencies in Idaho. Jimmy, thanks for clearing this up.
Thanks, Sam.
And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Thanks so much for listening. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.
These days, there's so much news, it can be hard to keep up with what it all means for you, your family, and your community. The Consider This podcast from NPR features our award-winning journalism. 6 days a week, we bring you a deep dive on a news story and provide the context and analysis that helps you make sense of the news. We get behind the headlines. We get to the truth. Listen to the Consider This podcast from NPR.